You are listening to WXR-WLP Milwaukee on 104.1 FM and on riverwestradio.com everywhere. Now you can also listen by telling your smart speaker to play River West Radio. Support for this program comes from Collectivo Coffee, dedicated to keeping Milwaukee's bike riding community rolling with bike pumps available for use in all Collectivo cafes. More info is available in cafes and at collectivocoffee.com. Cinema Fireside. Thanks, listeners, for listening in. If you're listening live, it is a dreary day in Milwaukee. That is, weather-wise, what your psychological realm is. Only you know. Light rain has persisted throughout the day, and obviously that foretells a sense of perpetual overcast, which it has as well been. Got to walk in this morning, had to use an umbrella, though. Brief walk, always good. It's good for you, but it's good if possible to walk several times a day. One luxurious walk is not really what it's all about. It's about keeping the body in movement. Thanks for calling in, Gabe. Really appreciate that, my man. It's always about keeping the body in movement, and if you're at a desk, stand up, every once in a while, all of that. And I just noticed someone has left their coconut water here. Well, let's see the status of that. Oh, it's empty. Excellent. That will go into the arena of recycling somehow, some way, man. Definitely. Waiting in the wings is LaMont Prospect after I finish with this monologue. And then I let the boys take over, because they're primetime conversationalists. And actually, I like LaMont a lot because he is a conversationalist. He does have a sultry voice, a deep voice, extremely well educated, well articulated, and thoughtful, too. He takes his time gathering his thoughts and then goes on and relates them to us. And I appreciate the intelligence behind that. So that's good, and him and Gabe have a really good on-air rapport. So that's cool. And I was talking. I was actually over at some place at an office, and and I was listening to the conversation, and it was an easy back and forth, and I was like, oh man, this is good, just even to listen to. So good stuff on that. On the radio, one of the sounds or the music that I like is Santana. Now I can say that. So if I said that 30 years, I had to wait about 30 years to say that, because black, white, chick, woman or something like that. I was like, no, man, I turned that off. I can't deal with that kind of stuff. I'm talking about, the Santana that you don't hear on the normal radio, that beautiful, ethereal guitar and so on and so forth. But now, since generations have passed, I can say it. And now that I'm on a different side of town, they're more apt to understand. 'Cause there's those people that listen to those radio stations. It's like, what is it statistically? Like, they hear those songs 1,700 times. It's like, it's mind-boggling. I don't go any more right of the dial than 90 point something or 91 point something, and I do not, I haven't ventured past that like for 10 years, because I don't listen to commercials or that repetitious crazy. But I mean, somebody has it on the radio and you hear it, and it's like, man, this is stuff that they've been listening to like for 35 years straight now. I mean, how is that even psychologically possible? It's insane. It must be numbing. Hey, have a good night. It must be numbing to the mind. I don't know. I don't know. Everyone's different. I don't really know how you could. I wouldn't be able to take it, man. That's oral torture, man. That's crazy. Bizarre, man. But we've got a killer. Besides this one, another killer radio station with just killer music in 3-hour blocks. Okay, that gives it away, man. All praises to that station as well as River West Radio, undoubtedly. But yeah, so now I can say Santana and be free of all the cliches and all of that stuff. Took about 30 years to be able to say that. Nice. So I ran across a book on the outer limits, and the cool thing about that is that uh, television. I don't watch television, but I like to read about it. So I've spent my life kind of just like reading about it and staying on the periphery, and I totally dig like 50s and 60s television, Playhouse 90, the writers like Patty Chayefsky, Rod Serling, Joseph Stefano, who actually co-created The Outer Limits, and he wrote the screenplay for Psycho based on the novel by Robert Bloch. So it's great just reading about that early era of television after, when TV really started to kick in as a populist notion after World War II. I think the first regular television season was like 48 or so. But yeah, that Outer Limits, Playhouse 90, Craft, all of that stuff, that's just killer to read about, and the writers and the way it was done. And one of our libraries has a free books lobby where people donate books, and they're on the shelves and in the on the cart. And one of the many books that I picked up was one was from last year, June, and it's a collection of 3 plays by Jean Kerr. So before I start getting to writing and so forth, I like to get inspired, and so I started reading the first play. May have seen that trade paperback throughout the decades. It's yellow with the 3 colorful titles on it. It's a pretty well known cover. So yeah, and that the play just moves along. It's about let's see, I think he's a writer, or no, he may be an editor, and his ex-wife is coming over, and his new fiance is there, and one of his business colleagues and so forth, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful play. And Ray Bradbury did a number of plays too, so I did get to read The Veldt, and that was quite interesting. And it's Ray Bradbury time. My colleague reads that. We read the stories, and then we can talk about them. It's a big red Ray Bradbury book that science fiction is good for the spring and summer. And those 50s films, where the two essential concerns were the atomic bomb and the Red Scare, and that transmuted into analogous form into giant creatures or people zombified, such as Invasion of the Body Snatchers, so on and so forth. So that's it's a great era. It's the 50s were actually, you know what, too. There's in the 50s it was, big time monsters, attack of this, attack of the 50-foot this, that, the everything, insects, people, etc. And the other one was UFOs, aliens. So it was the atomic scare in the guise of a giant. The resonance would be the giant creatures, and then the aliens, the Martians, tons of flying saucer flicks, and like I think it's Invaders from Mars. I don't want to say the title because I'm not sure, but I've seen many of them. But anyway, what I was getting to is when man himself becomes the monster, which starts to take place in the latter half of the 60s. But I haven't seen it yet. I've yet to see it. It's with War Notes. It's from 59 or 60. It's called Private Property, and that might be some of the first indications of man as monster. I don't know. I haven't seen it yet, so we have yet to check it out. And Gabe, thanks for holding on. I just want to say this. So it's a jury day, jury evening, and I kind of sometimes read some plays and that to get rolling psychologically. And then also, if I can't write about something, I can't write about it. But I all of a sudden got inspired by something in real life, and actually made a breakthrough with this new play, because the ones that I've gotten completed, they've basically all been accepted. Now I've got to start completing these new ones, because I don't think I have any more complete ones to get out there. I have one that'll be in Milwaukee at the Village Playhouse next month. That got accepted into their one-act festival. So, yeah, I really got to put the pedal to the metal, man, and keep working on these new works for sure. And I think, yeah, it's probably time to say, hey, Gabe, how you doing, my man? Are you there?
Hey, Mark. Hey, LaMont. How we all doing?
Well, let me hold on. Here's LaMont.
Good evening, Gabe. Good evening, Mark.
LaMont.
Good evening.
Great to have you back. So
Thank
excellent
you.
stuff. So yeah, it's been an interesting week. You know, there's always 6 days between the show. Some weeks you get a lot of films in. Some weeks you get a lot of writing in. Some weeks none. Some weeks a lot. So you know, this week it was good. I've been taking a break from writing for quite a while, and you know, sometimes you just got to Borchardt stuff. You just have to sit down, you just got to drink your coffee, and you just have to write and just make sure you write and keep writing. Write when it's comfortable, write when it's not comfortable, write in the morning, write in the evening, write when you have to write when you don't have to write.
Good
and,
God.
You know, you just get the stuff out there. And, you know, I was working on a number of fiction pieces some months ago. Then I just took a total break, and I said, listen, my normal day-to-day life just has to get some structure here and needs some changes. So I just hit the brakes on the nonfiction writing and the fiction writing, and just like a blast right out of the gate, you know, just like a horse going at full throttle, maybe not going to win the race, but definitely going to be a strong contender for the bets, you know, just bursting out and riding around the racetrack, back in action again. Very happy about that.
Well, welcome back.
Oh, absolutely. But, you know, on top of that, too, what's crazy is, like, you know, I just got a ton of stuff done in my personal life, tons of yard work, tons of gardening, tons of, like, just stuff that needs to get done.
Did you do the wash?
Oh, and the laundry got done yesterday, and tons of movies that got watched, too.
That's what excites us most.
Yeah.
For the show,
Fringe.
contextually.
Absolutely. Well, you know, in most films that I watch, I try to watch in context for the show. So there's stuff that I'll watch that's focused on certain filmmakers, stuff that I'll watch that's focused on the mainstream, just to keep it balanced so I don't focus just on what I want to watch. Because there are weeks where there's a mini-series that pops up that's like better filmmaking, better storytelling, better acting than any film. Like, I have a stronger interest in some, you know, sometimes AMC or HBO or FX, the BBC. Some of these films that are not necessarily technically films that are released theatrically or that follow the, you know, like the format of a film, they're released episodically on television. Some of it has better writing, better filmmaking, and better execution of the film form than most movies I see. But because of the technicality of the fact that they follow more of the television medium of the way that they're released, I would say that they're technically works of television. So I'm a little hesitant to talk about them on the show because I want to keep parameters of what we discuss. However, I love breaking off once in a while. So shows like The Terror, which is on AMC, if they would have condensed that, just this season of that show into a film, and Ridley Scott had directed it, it would be among the best horror films ever made. As a work of television, I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but it's worthwhile. It's better than worthwhile. It's great storytelling. It's great acting. It takes its time with small characters that turn into major characters. It understands nuance. It understands restraint. It understands the exact opposite. It has everything that Ridley Scott brings to a horror film that he directs.
What doesn't it have?
There's not a whole lot that I see lacking in it, to be honest. It's a horror film series that takes place in the late 1800s, and it understands the limitations of the Victorian era very well. It talks about the manners of the Victorian era because it deals with character. It's very similar to PBS's Upstairs, Downstairs.
Yeah, you know they novelized those? I was at a book sale and I saw Upstairs, Downstairs Part 2, and I said, nah, man, I better leave that for someone who's going to really dig it.
Yeah.
But I did like the cover and the era.
Upstairs, Downstairs is incredible. That's among the greatest works that television has ever produced.
Dude, I was a kid and I remember that theme coming on. I'd go back so quick it would make your head spin, man, to hear that theme again live. And man, I would redo some stuff like you wouldn't believe.
But shows like The Terror, and sometimes when I'll be the person to tell other people about a show or a miniseries or something like that, and I'm sort of like, well, I'm trying to stay focused on movies, but if you had to pick a couple of shows, I would pick this, and this, and they're like, oh, movie guys telling me about TV shows, and then they come back like a couple weeks later, either like people that I talk to in Milwaukee or people I work with, and they're like, that is the best TV show I have ever seen. That is the best, like, teleplay. Like, episode 4 was, like, the best writing I've ever seen in a TV show. And they're like, have you watched the whole thing? And I'm like, of course not. If I just binged TV shows, I wouldn't have time for the movies. So, the only shows that I'm stuck on right now are the docuseries. It is a documentary that's broken into episodes, but if it had been released as a film, I guarantee you we'd be talking about the Robert Kennedy for President documentary right now. It's exquisite. It's thoroughly researched. It's brilliantly brought to life. It's about a great subject. It's enigmatic. It's cinematic. It's wonderful. It's a timely subject. It's as good as any documentary, great documentary I've ever seen. It happens to be a TV show. It's 4 episodes, and it's excellent. It's a great documentary, but due to the nature of our show, what did I see this week? What didn't I see this week? I went to go see Avengers Infinity War. I saw Deadpool 2. I finally got around to watching Hostiles, the late 1800s, sort of post-Civil War Native American cowboys and Indians drama, which transcends the genre and actually manages to be a stirring, riveting, thoroughly entertaining action film with a great performance by Christian Bale in the lead. Wes Studi doing the Wes Studi thing. It falls into some trappings of the Western action film, especially the sort of revisionist Western action film as modeled by Clint Eastwood in Unforgiven in 92 and other films like True Grit in 2010. It has a lot of psychological realism. It has a lot of downtrodden. It has a lot of small talk. It has a lot of moments where characters are allowed to just be, where there isn't this busyness. There isn't this Aaron Sorkin exchange of verbal martial arts. The film runs 2 hours and 15 minutes, and I get the feeling that there's like hours of film of the finished cut that was left on the floor, because there are supporting characters that are very thinly fleshed out, but I get the feeling that what's left there are these very like quaint, ordinary, and I don't mean ordinary in a boring way, like, oh, this is just marginal, this is unimportant, in the fact that it's slow moving, it's deliberate, it's quiet, it allows a sort of a natural poetic pace and rhythm. The characters talk to each other in this very sort of quiet, almost whispered way where they're just exchanging, they're not banter, but they exchange dialogue in this very naturalistic, almost impressionistic way where there's just scenery in the background, and it's about as un-John Ford as you can get.
Sounds excellent.
It's
really
good, but
excellent.
Yeah, but it falls into some of the familiar traps of a film of its type. It becomes a little predictable in its last third, but it's always exciting. It's always riveting. I have to recommend Hostiles. I finally finished Planet of the Apes from 1967, which was agonizingly boring for the majority of it.
Wow.
I have to say that in that last third, I finally saw why people regard that film as a classic, why people regard that as a great film of the late 60s. It's not a work of art by any stretch, but it's a time capsule, and it ultimately displays a lot of very adept character development, and it's a great piece of pulpy entertainment. It's constantly engaging. It's a well-shot movie for its era. There's a lot of big-budget studio films that have the trappings of the studio system from the late 50s and early 60s on it, and I can't stand a lot of those trappings. Dr. Dolittle, like just films made in this big studio way, even though the new studio means are coming in. But it's definitely, I see where its reputation comes from. Deadpool 2 is just, if it wouldn't have been insulting to ask, I want my money back. This take on metaism for the sake of metaism needs to stop. It's not going to stop. It's an argument that's going to fall on deaf ears. This film is artless. It's bland. It's pointless. It's pretentious. It goes nowhere. It's a film that's designed to make dumb people feel intelligent, clever, and inclusive on jokes that are not necessary.
Now, Gabe, how many times have I told you, if you feel strongly about a film, don't sugarcoat it. Lay it out.
Deadpool 2 just needs... It's going to find this huge audience. It's going to break some box office records, as a lot of these Marvel films break box office records. But it just is as loud and vulgar and stupid as it gets. And the thing is that it's a film that's designed to make itself... It portrays itself as being smart and incisive and witty and provocative, and it's none of those things. It's a self-righteous piece of trash. I was not amused. Granted, there are 5 moments in the film that are just hysterically brilliant and laugh-out-loud hilarious that doesn't make up for the utter lack of the rest of the film. There's just a lack. There's just a lack. There's a void. And to be fair, it's a very well-made film. It's a very well-shot film. It's a very well-composed film. It's put together. And to be fair, and to be even more fair to it, for the audience that it's designed for, it is a smart piece of entertainment. It's a movie that follows sort of cultural meta logic that looks at its own... It's a film. It's a Marvel film made by Marvel Studios. That's a film designed to tear apart Marvel films, but it still falls prey to being a Marvel film. So any sort of incision or any sort of wit that it claims or wants to have is rendered totally void and useless because it's not acerbic at all. It doesn't have any flair. It doesn't have any bite. It doesn't have any meaning. It doesn't go anywhere, and it ultimately collapses under its own weight. There is no weight. It actually collapses under its own nothingness.
Did you see it, LaMont?
No.
And at the same time, it's going to make a huge profit. It's going to entertain a lot of people. So in that regard, it's a total success. Great job. I finally got around to watching Bombshell, the Hedy Lamarr documentary, which was as good and as disappointing as I was fearing. It's a film that's made very much like it's a film that is going to be released on PBS as an American Masters film. So there's a certain limitation to the cinematic quality that it has, but it's also Hedy Lamarr's story, and there's layers to her story as an actress, as an icon, as an image, as a sex object, and as a scientist. It's very interesting. It's very thought-provoking. It's very involving, and it's also a strong story about a strong woman who did things on her terms and did things the way that she wanted to do them because she just felt that they needed to be done. And she ended up changing world history, and she invented a technology that shapes the very means by which I communicate on this show tonight. Wi-Fi technology, oscillating radio technology, which allowed torpedoes to not be jammed by radio signals during World War II, which led to the invention of the sophisticated advancement of radar, which has now led to wireless technology as we know it. It's an interesting film. It's a great film. I've always been interested in Hedy Lamarr as the photographic object, as the sexual fetishization object that she resented, that she was. Films like Algiers and films like Ecstasy are interesting artifacts, much like Marlene Dietrich's early films are very interesting films about that early period, that pre-code era and the beginning of that code era, where women were sort of given that were given license to be larger characters, to be more prominent characters, to have more freedom as equals and even as dominant figures, as not figures of predatoriness where they're looked at as these sort of sinful objects that are going to destroy, this very dignified nature of man, but looked at as
I could see that happening.
Looked at as their own creation, as their own their own culture and looking at them with might and awe and wonder, and not just as sex objects. So that era of early Hollywood is really interesting, from about 1930 until about 1934. A lot of cool movies that came out of there. Hedy Lamar's greatest period is between about 1939 and 1942. She made a number of films with Clark Gable. Bombshell does an okay job. The film Bombshell does an okay job of going over those films, but mostly it's a biographical sketch. It's a PBS biographical sketch. It does the very typical PBS biographical sketch. But it's a very good movie, and it's worth watching, especially if you're not familiar with Hedy Lamarr and her life's work as an actress or as a scientist. And
you
lastly,
you did say Hedy. You did say Hedy
Lamarr.
Hedy and not Headley. Headley, right?
Not Headley.
Blazing Saddles. Sorry.
That's it. Yeah, Blazing Saddles joke.
Would you recommend to LaMont to see this documentary?
Well, it's a great documentary about early Hollywood, and it's about an interesting figure in early Hollywood. She was sophisticated. She was interesting. She was tortured. Wow. She had an interesting life. She had an interesting career, and she was just an interesting person. And her contributions to society and humanity are worth noting. That in itself is worth watching the movie. The movie itself is just a documentary. It's a standardly well-made, efficient documentary that doesn't take a single artistic risk. I guess you can't criticize a documentary for doing that. Watching that Robert Kennedy documentary, there's a number of brilliant choices that they make in that film, the way that they use the footage. There's a scene where they show Robert Kennedy coming out in the 1964 Democratic Convention, and they just stay with the footage. They just stay with Robert Kennedy coming out on the stage to that legendary standing ovation, and they just stay on the shot of him and his face and his humility and him trying to bring order to the convention and the people refusing to stop applause. And there's no music over it. They just stay on the sound of the applause on him. It's a bold choice, and they stay with it for minutes.
Wow.
And it's a great moment of documentary filmmaking. I was moved emotionally by it. I was moved by it as a work of filmmaking, as a choice in editing. There's a lot of great moments in that documentary, which is technically a work of television, but that's one of the best documentaries I've seen in quite a while. I would say the only documentary that I've seen in a long time, like a good period that would stand up with anything that the Maisels brothers made, is First Cousin Once Removed, which is like an art film itself in the filmmaking choices that the artist makes. It's like its own surrealist art. It's like its whole universe, but it also is technically a documentary about a great writer slipping into dementia and Alzheimer's. That is mostly filmed just in one location in a very bland apartment, but is accrued with lots of very, very bold, brilliant artistic choices. I was going to talk about that film on the show about 3 weeks ago, and I just never got around to it. But First Cousin Once Removed, if you're into films, documentaries that take artistic risks and are willing to stand as their own sort of narrative feature art films as themselves, that's a film that I can't recommend enough. And of course, last but not least, Avengers: Infinity War. What I'm surprised by at seeing this movie is the fact that it's worthwhile. That it's if you're not into Marvel films, it's not worth seeing. I wouldn't even recommend it. I wouldn't even pretend to recommend it. But I was, as someone that goes to see all those films for better and for worse and for even worse and for even worse. Avengers: Infinity War is a surprising, exciting, adventurous addition to the Marvel canon. In that, one of the main characters of the film is a character who has to endorse genocide as a means of humanitarian, as a means of goodwill towards the entire universe. And there's an interesting discussion that comes up in the film through his actions about generosity and empathy and kindness and ultimately benevolence through the act of literal genocide, of literally streaming. It sounds ridiculous to say this stuff out loud, but the fact that the character goes from like kingdom to kingdom, planet to planet and basically exterminates half the population, so that way a civilization, each respective civilization, can then flourish and survive and feed itself and function again. And of course, it's a Marvel film. It's an Avengers film. This is like film costs like $400 million or something. And the action scenes are actually cognizant. They're well made. They're well edited. They're well shot. And because the film is essentially 4 films in one, where all the characters are split up into different settings and different locations and are on different missions, you don't have the smorgasbord, where it's just the overload of every character constantly in the frame together, talking to each other all the time, where every character is reacting to every character. You have these smaller, intimate settings, smaller groups of characters having smaller, dramatic interchanges, where you're allowed actual moments of quiet and reflectiveness and actual subjective, these moments of subjective reasoning where I would almost say restraint. I was extremely surprised by the film I saw. I thought I was going to see something vulgar and loud and bombastic and just unending. And in fact, I saw something really reserved and really like kind of delicious in its last third. And I could not have been more surprised, because I don't expect a movie with a title like Avengers Infinity War to be a film with character studies and questions about who we are as human beings where they actually resonate, where the question of what it means to be alive and what it means to be a part of a larger concept of being a living part of a larger consciousness, I just was baffled. I was utterly baffled at how much I enjoyed that movie.
Oh, you just answered my question. I was going to say, were you having fun while you were being baffled? I guess you were.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So that was the week.
My man, LaMont, have you seen that film?
No.
What have you seen?
I haven't had a chance to get to any theaters or catch any documentaries.
You know what? You're your own man in your own time. You may have been sitting around the cozy electronic fireplace of the television in your own abode, man. What happened then?
Well, I actually, last night, I watched the original version of Scarface.
Bless your heart. Howard Hawks.
Yes.
The original.
Yeah, the original. Yeah. The black and white with
sure. Paul Mooney.
Paul Mooney. And so I invested in, a few years back, a projector for my living room, which is 10 times smaller than a big TV and probably half the price. And you can, I'm able to just display the stuff on a wall, and it's so much more interesting to watch. But I appreciate hearing the reviews, because I don't get out. So it is nice to hear really cognizant, intelligent, and thorough reviews like that.
I just want to say, LaMont, I'm very cognizant about the juxtaposition between your voices, because with Gabe, it's like a rail car just rolling down the tracks, and you better step out of the way. And with you, it's like some beckoning into the vortex of sleep, man, with this kind of sultry midnight hour DJ voice. So I'm like freaking on the juxtaposition, but please, I digress.
Thank you. I thought it was interesting, Gabe, what you mentioned about Hostile. Is
Hostile.
It? Hostile. I didn't see it, but I thought it was really interesting what you said about the dialogue and how it really stood out, and it seemed valid and realistic and important versus
the Western.
You don't see a lot of films that have that.
Mm-hmm. Well, the verbal martial arts era that we're in, with a lot of TV, and what's considered smart TV versus good, there's all these different layers of writing and all this different stuff of what people are entertained by and engaged by versus what I think is a sort of naturalism or a sort of art or sort of poetry And all that stuff can intersect and intertwine. And of course, it's all subjective. It's all left to your opinion. But yeah, like seeing a movie that is almost, that a lot of people I think would consider boring or consider very slow moving or just like laborious. And I'm just like, no, this is it. This is like a movie where everyone's just taking their time. Like things are moving at this very candid, natural pace. And then of course there are these, these action scenes that even those are unfolding at this more natural pace. It's just cool because there's so many different kinds of films that you can see. In Westerns have that ability to sometimes be these works of utterly brilliant, like, poetry, and other times they have this ability to be just like these dumb, vulgar, idiotic, like the epitomization of the bad mainstream film.
Mm-hmm. How would you compare it to, say, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid?
Definitely not comical like that, but I would say and less bantery. But that Butch Cassidy is a strange film because it's a film that has this sort of naturalism, and it has this sort of almost improvisational like feel where it's just so candid. But it also is a film that's reliant on the charm of the studio star system.
Have you read William Goldman's book, Adventures in the Screen Trade?
No, but we had talked about that on the show a few weeks ago, and I'm like dying to read that now.
That has the full script in it of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Well,
in some ways, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid is like the epitomal Hollywood film.
Yeah, it's
in a good way.
The Blu-ray version of it that came out a few years back has a significant amount of featurettes and interviews and things like that. And, the script really just blew everyone away, and they thought it was, they could tell the first read that it was clever and intelligent and funny, and the studios, all of the actors involved, everyone. I think the studio paid like $300,000 for that script, and everyone was just so into it. And it's interesting. Initially, they had Paul Newman considered for Sundance, and not Butch Cassidy. And of course, all the interesting stories about. Was that directed by?
George Roy Hill?
George Roy Hill.
Yep.
And of course, then you think about the chemistry between Newman and Redford, and the Sting, and Catherine Ross was was just great in the thing, and the music
casting,
even
the extras casting, every role in that film feels very precise. And there's a documentary that was made about the casting director who was the most sought after casting director of that time, of the 60s and 70s and even into the early 80s.
Wow.
And she was George Roy Hill's casting director. When he won Best Director and Best Picture for the Sting, he said, "How could I have lost? I had Elaine May, but it's Elaine something on my side. How could I have lost?" Casting, that line, that classic, casting is half of everything, or maybe everything. You look at something like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and you have all the elements, pre-production, production, post-production, that creates the final product. And along the way, had the casting had those actors not been actors and actresses all been cast the way that they were, we'd be talking about a completely different film that would be perceived a completely different way. The screenplay might even be looked at completely different based on the dynamics of how those scenes are played out, how those scenes are shot, how the interaction of those certain epitomal lines delivered that certain epitomal way. Oh, for a second there I thought we were in trouble. If it wasn't Newman saying that, that line would be completely different because of the mechanism of the way that Newman uses sarcasm versus the way that Redford uses sarcasm. it's just those subtleties. It's the interaction. It's the intimacy. If Catherine Ross hadn't been cast in that role, we'd be talking about a completely different film.
I think though you can say that about quite a few films. In that, look at Godfather Part 1. Actually, I think Dustin Hoffman was actually up for the role even before Al Pacino, and so it's interesting how, and that story's probably happened so many times in Hollywood where somebody was initially or originally considered, and then the person that got the role got it, and then you.
Well, look at Dirty Harry. I mean, the number of people. Bullet is another one. Bullet, Dirty Harry, The French Connection. You look at films where these were Hollywood machines, even though some of these films are considered these like epitomal new Hollywood films that sort of changed the way we looked at what a Hollywood film could be or a mainstream film. A lot of these movies were created through the same mechanisms as any Hollywood movie. A script developed by a producer, developed by a studio with a director on board, maybe directors changed, producers, executive producers, studio heads, and then the development of who's going to, casting. And if you look at Bullet, if someone else had been in that role, we might even be talking about the greatest action film of all time. I mean, it's very possible that other people in that role would have made that film even better. It's like impossible to think about the film Bullet not having Steve McQueen in it, but it's very possible. Same with Dirty Harry. Had Steve McQueen played Dirty Harry, we'd be talking about the history of action films would have been changed completely. Even Keanu Reeves, had Keanu Reeves not been cast in Point Break, The Matrix, John Wick, Speed, the way we talk about action films would be quite different. Hollywood films and the way we perceive Keanu Reeves. Casting and, the way that an actor's career can change. I mean, the amount of films that Dustin Hoffman was considered for that he turned down, I mean, it's just mind-boggling. Dustin Hoffman in The Godfather instead of Al Pacino, it's very plausible, and it would have been very possible, knowing what Dustin Hoffman's capable of and seeing the similarities between him and Pacino. But it's like it's really hard to imagine The Godfather not starring Al Pacino.
I think Diane Keaton was really hoping and cheering that Al would get the part. And also with Butch Cassidy, Newman had to really push for Robert Redford because the studios just didn't want him. They thought this. I think prior to that he had maybe done a couple comedies or something, and they didn't take him serious. To play the role.
TV and sort of well, I wouldn't say marginal, but like Barefoot in the Park, The Chase, the Arthur Penn film with Jane Fonda and Marlon Brando. And he had mostly done TV work, like he had been in he had been in a couple of Route 66 episodes and craft theater and some stuff like that. He was considered more of a stage actor too, and TV actor than a serious film actor.
Speaking of, Steve McQueen and Dustin Hoffman, what did you think of Papillon?
I think it's a great. Mark, I'm going to use the word
Gabe.
Flawed. I'm going to say it. Yep. I don't know what other word to use.
Please do.
Yeah, I don't know what else to say. I think it's a great entertainment. I think it's one of those 1973 films that's as epitomally 1973 as it gets. It's a great, grandiose entertainment of its time. It's very fun. It's, by today's standards, it's almost arty because it takes its time, and it has a lot of long shots in it. It has a lot of very slow-moving sections, and it allows for a very brooding, very subterranean and dark and malevolent characters, and it allows for a very dark character study. That by today's standards would be considered almost radical, but by the standards of cinema in the early 70s, it was just sort of standard operating procedure. I think it's a terrific entertainment.
Some of those scenes are quite interesting when Steve McQueen is having the nightmares, and everything is slowed down and distorted, and he has that dream or nightmare about standing in front of the judge and the jury, and they accuse him of the worst crime imaginable, which they said would be a wasted life. And so you got some unusual insight into the character or the writing, but I've always found that film as tough as it is to watch sometimes, because when you look at the conditions of the penal system in French Guiana at that time and everything, here this guy's got this undying will to not give up, and that last scene where he's just floating away on that bag of coconuts, and he says, I'm still here. I'm still here.
I think we're all going to end up floating away on a bag of coconuts someday.
It's
going to be the way it is, man.
Yeah. There's something really sort of common denominator about, not lowest common denominator, but there's something really inviting about the indomitable will and spirit, where there's films focused on just a character's sheer will to survive or thrive or achieve greatness or just break free of the chains of tyranny of a system. And I think it's a useful device, and when it's done well, when it's done insightful, when it goes past the usual confines of the usual script or the usual mechanisms, and you get into the territory of the surreal or the absurd, or just the downright metaphysical, I think that it allows for something truly universal. Schindler's List is a film that really, really, upon re-examination of that film, what I always find more and more increasingly interesting is just Liam Neeson's central performance, and just how totally in command Spielberg is of the film through Neeson's very manicured performance, because Neeson was very resentful of Spielberg during the process of making that film, because he felt through about the first half of the shoot that Spielberg was just using him as a physical puppet, like a marionette doll, because there would be scenes, and there's some of the most iconic images of the film, like where Schindler is sitting in the cabaret watching another character, and he's smoking, and his head is in this very manicured position. All of that was gestured by Spielberg to the specifics. Neeson had zero say over how he conducted his performance during many of those close-ups, during many of those sequences, even down to the way that he had a slight lisp, or the way that he would stutter, or the way that he would just be curt or cut off phrases where he had lines of dialogue and sort of say, "No, you're not going to say that. You're going to say this." Neeson, for a time, felt that he wasn't allowed to really expand. And really what he started to see later on into the film was that he was really under the gaze of a masterful filmmaker that was really understood the different quotients of this film, that this film was about the Holocaust, but it was also about this man's personal struggle to become a different type of man and a different type of great man. That instead of the industrialist, where his mission was only to make money, his new mission that he went on with just as much fervor and dedication was just to keep these Jews, was just to keep his, I think it was like 1,100 Jews alive. And realizing ultimately that they weren't his property any longer, that these were lives, that these were human beings. It's really a stunning film at times. However, you could say that there's problems with Schindler's List in that, it's a fascist film itself in its view of the Holocaust. That what it leaves out, what it says with this stone authority. There's a lot of issues with Schindler's List. There's a lot of shortcomings, but what it does nail, I think in some ways it's an overappreciated film, and it's also an underappreciated film for some of its smaller qualities.
Was it typical of Spielberg to almost sounds like he was micromanaging it at some point, but he had this vision of what he wanted, and because I've seen several documentaries on Stanley Kubrick films, and how the actors talk about him making them do 20, 30, 40 takes, one
90.
after another, and just over and over and over until he something good, something bad comes out, and it almost becomes natural.
I think LaMont, there's a new book out by his chauffeur, then assistant, Kubrick's assistant, and I think that goes over some of the ideology of his methodology. And I don't know. I think it's called Stanley Kubrick and Me, the name of the book. It's fascinating.
Yep.
Absolutely.
That's what, Mark, thank you for bringing that up. That one and Space Odyssey is a recent book that just came out about the making of 2001, the Space Odyssey. The book is called Space Odyssey, Kubrick, Clark, and the Making of a Masterpiece. And it's been in the works for a long time, and I think it just got released 2 months ago, maybe a month ago. And it's all about the making of 2001, A Space Odyssey. I talked to a friend who's about halfway through it. Says it's exquisite, it's informative. It's just a must-read for film fans.
Dude, I've got so many Kubrick books. I don't know where they are, but I started to amass a collection of them. Actually, there's a great one about Eyes Wide Open, about the writing of it. I highly recommend that one. And there's also a brief one by Michael Hare on Kubrick.
Yes,
too.
sir. That's one of my favorite books, period.
That rocks, man. And, yes.
Absolutely.
And also there's a book where they have the screenplay for Eyes Wide Shut, and Traum Novella, the 20s novel that it's based on, which is a fascinating comparison in a read. So, those are some nice Kubrick books to refer to that are not more like the larger tomes about him and so on and so forth. And I also want to I think did I mention this last week about the radio dramas that were kind of foreshadowed Duel, that suspense one.
Yes.
Snow on 66 and Lights Out. What the Devil? Did we? Gabe, you've got the mind of a.
Yes, we did.
Yeah,
yes,
definitely. Thank you, my man. Yeah, because I was falling asleep. You get so tired. There's a radio station that's had radio dramas on for about 20 years now on Sunday nights, but you get so tired and it gets so fragmented. You have no clue what you're listening to, man. It's like, oh man, there's something going on, but I just don't know what it is, man. So,
but yeah,
and LaMont, man, can you weigh in with your nightly radio drama experience?
It's kind of like you mentioned last week. You turn it on, you listen, you hear the introduction, the story start, and if you get so tired at some point, it just kind of you just fall asleep, and you might even wake up 3/4 of it through, 3/4 of the way through.
Oh yeah, it's like, right in the middle of some crazy proceedings.
Yeah, exactly, and it's almost affecting your dream state. But
what one do you predominantly listen to, LaMont? I know, but this is for the sake of our audience.
Usually the CBS Radio Mystery Theater.
1,399 episodes.
Yeah, and you can just Google it on your phone, and they're all there for free. You can look up any episode by any year, but each night after midnight they put a new episode on. So if you weren't pleased with the one you heard the night before, you just have to sign back in after midnight, and you've got another one. With reference to the Kubrick, I remember hearing so many actors giving commentary how they just almost felt like, it was almost like torture to have to just continue to do all those takes and all the sort of repeated tries at it. over and over and over. And it's almost like, I don't know if he felt that, he didn't want the actors to just have it too easy, or, you were blessed to have this role. And so, but then that also reminds me of some of the commentary I listened to on a film Mark mentioned last week, Chinatown, where who was the lead actor in that?
Nicholson.
Nicholson
Directed
again,
by
yeah.
Polanski.
And
After that, he did The Tenet, and before that, he did. I think it was the last one he did. Before that was either What or Macbeth.
But
before
Nicholson,
Chinatown.
yeah.
Yep.
Polanski wanted more takes from Nicholson, and Nicholson said, no, it's good enough. And apparently Nicholson went back to his trailer because he wanted to watch an LA Lakers game. And Polanski went into his trailer and picked up the television and threw it out the door.
There you go.
Sounds like Polanski.
Yeah, I've read 3 Polanski biographies and his autobiography, Polanski on Polanski. It's infinitely fascinating. Some of our lives are over halfway over, and he's in his 20s going to Lotz Film School in Poland, and I mean, if we're still alive and on 2 feet, we have the opportunity to continue to create our art, man. So, I'm glad I said that, because now I'm looking up at the clock. Gabe, thanks for listening in for being a huge part of this, Gabe, and we wish you the best.
Absolutely, Mark. LaMont, great stuff.
Thank you for the great reviews.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Great. Thanks for coming on, LaMont. This is awesome stuff. Mark, thank you. Listeners, thank you. This is what we do. We'll be back next week. Yeah, I'm out of here. Thanks, guys.
See you, man. So, yeah, I remember The Film Director's Superstar, great trade paperback. I was reading it years and years ago. Polanski was in it, and interestingly enough, Norman Mailer also had a chapter on it, and I was just really in love with that book, and I believe I read the whole thing. It's The Film Director's Superstar. I think it's one of those Super 70s books, and yeah, that if I find that again, I'm going to dig back into that. And like I said, I hit 3 Polanski biographies, Polanski on Polanski, his autobiography, and in a great film book is Ingmar Bergman's journal called Images, and that's something to read if you're into filmmaking. Is Images. I know he has his autobiography. What is it? The Magic Lantern. I've read that as well. Actually, it's a breezy read. Are Lee Volman's memoirs, Choices and Changes. Your sly smile kind of.
Well, when you said the Magic Lantern, the first thing that came to my mind was Mozart. But
okay. It refers to the projection device. And just so you know, Lamont, before you get into any tracted thinking, unfortunately, I'm going to have to thank you for being a guest. I really appreciate it, Lamont, and I really appreciate Gabe, and I really appreciate our listeners. I got to fly the friendly skies very early tomorrow morning. I'm like writing out a chart, man. Should I leave like at 4 in the morning or what? It's funny. I'm pretty well packed, though. It'll just be a week sojourn, and it'll be great. Get some writing done, and it'll be all good. We will be on at the same time next week on WXRWLP 104.1 FM Milwaukee. To hear past episodes, visit riverwestradio.com/shows and click Cinema Fireside.